Hi, everybody. Steve Outtrim. Welcome to Crypto Beast. This latest episode is a very special one. We're going to get right into the true origins of the Grateful Dead by the person who came up with the entire concept, Chalmers Wood. It goes by Chip. We're also joined today by Robert Forte and Joe Atwell. So, hi, gentlemen. I'll hand it over to you, Robert, to introduce Chip to the audience. Thank you.
Well, okay. Steve, good to be here. I guess I'm in a way responsible for this because I was the one that brought Chip into our little research group here. And so I connected with Chip and began to hear this marvelous stream of consciousness storytelling, which we're going to get into tonight, about his point of view about how the Grateful Dead got started, really in discussions in the Kennedy White House. And Chip had furnished me with documents to prove his pedigree as a member of this, blue-blooded American family. And his grandfather who used to dine on Grover Cleveland's yacht, and the origin of Eggs Benedict, and pictures. What fun to go over some of these things and to share them with the public, and because we're getting into some really, really interesting hidden history of subjects that have affected millions of people. And I'm glad to be here and share my insights. So there you go.
Fantastic, Rob. That's a wonderful introduction. Thanks very much. Yeah, applause. And so maybe we'll throw it over to you, Chip, and let us know your story and how you'd like to begin it. But the connection immediately to both John Perry Barlow and Bob Weir is that you guys were all at school together in Colorado Springs.
Well, we're all at school. It's 1963. Let me do a little back history. At Fountain Valley, I'd been there for 2 years. During the first year, my plan was to build a following in Colorado, and then after university, come back to Colorado and run for the Senate and get into the Armed Services Committee and the Intelligence Committee and do good for planet Earth through the Senate, right? And then in October of my sophomore year, two interesting things happened. One thing was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I found out from Dad, who was advising Kennedy at the time. They had played freshman football at Harvard, 1935, didn't like each other. Kennedy tended to date rape, the girlfriends of the other blue bloods. Anyway, and the second event was and everybody at the school knew that my dad was in the White House, but nobody would say it to me, but that all, Chip's father's in the White House, right? And so there was a big to-do because it was kind of a dude ranch. It wasn't Phillips Exeter. So one time I'm standing outside of the dining room and this blonde kid comes running up to me and stops about 20 feet away. He won't come up to my face, but he stops kind of a safe distance away and starts screaming at me, "My father's as good as your father," da, 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 on and on and on and on and on. And like I'm his proctor. I've been to boarding school for 4 years before I came to Fountain Valley. This is my 6th year. I have perfect relations with the headmaster. I'm the new guy proctor. I'm the guy that goes in, and when a new guy gets homesick, I'm the guy that hypnotizes them, tell them it's all okay, and it works. And this is John Perry Barlow, and he has a big deal about my father and his father being as good as my father. And then he turns around and runs away, right? And I'm like, what? Hello? And he's kind of like that. So before that, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Dad kind of tells me what's happened because Dad had been a superstar during the Marshall Plan, rebuilding Europe during after World War II, and he gave lectures every night. Well, Chip, we're going to be going to see where Vercingetorix surrendered to Caesar tomorrow, and I want you to pay special attention because blah, 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 4,000 words later, and I'm like 3.5 years old, and it's like, wow, right? So I don't have baseball or marbles or Cracker Jacks. I have European history and the rebuilding of Europe and the meaning of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and bombs, and I'm into it. I'm kind of a savant, right?
So you were brought up in a diplomatic family.
Anyway, Weir at the same time shows up that year, and he's a mess. He's been kicked out of like 3 boarding schools. He's a Christian Scientist, fanatic Christian Scientist of the Mary Baker Eddy type, and she had a certain opium problem. But that's a secret. Don't tell anybody, okay? And he's the type that when I'd make fun of him, I'd say, well, if you break your arm, will God heal it immediately? Yes, it will, Chip, you asshole. And, you know, but will he do it for me because I'm a Catholic? No, right? So we don't get along real well. And he's not getting good grades, he's not adjusting, but he plays the guitar. So after the Cuban Missile Crisis, I find out about the whole thing, how close we came to a global thermonuclear war. That's really dangerous shit, right? They tell us how close it'd been, and then what happens? We need a psychological operation to calm the world down, to anesthetize and soothe planet Earth, because the World War II types, read Curtis LeMay's, General Curtis LeMay's, you know, Cuban escapade, and you'll find out how close we come. We need a psychological operation to chill out the world. And everybody knew about it. England, France, Germany, all the NATO nations knew about it. CETO nations knew about it. But this is extremely secret. This is voice only. Probably no documents, still. Still. And it happened that for the previous, for the previous 11 years, I'd been telling Dad, because I'd heard Beethoven's Fifth as a child and been really impressed. Daddy, can I start a band to beat the Soviets with American music? Our music's better than their music. And we can seduce the world with it. The Soviets will fall and everything will be great and we won't have odd atom bombs. Yeah, Chip, that's real. Good idea, Chip. Go play with your model airplanes, right? Then suddenly in April, March, a super spy called
Chip, we lost you there for a second. I think you were talking about
the
Kim
Russians,
Philby.
What was that? Our Man in Havana? It's true. I kid you not. Anyway, he defects probably, I would think, to go to Russia so that if there's a real close incident and they get really, really close to launching, they can hold him as a hostage. And he says, no, let me analyze it. And he calms them down and they don't launch and we don't lose half of planet Earth. Right? So he becomes a diplomatic hostage like in the old days. And suddenly Dad says, well, okay, you can do it. You can start a band. Right? And it's like, okay. It's like, I'm going to have the whole CIA behind me. Lansdale, Colby, all the research department, every fucking buddy. And I'm 16 years old.
And
right?
the State Department as well, right?
State Department, FBI, KGB, GRU, the Pope, Deuxième Bureau, Sex Sportif. I'm going to have everybody on little old me. It's because of that story that I sent you, Ben's Bacon.
Yeah, and I'll be sharing some of Chip's writing and excerpts from his forthcoming book on the blog at burners.me, and there'll be links to all the topics that we're talking about tonight will be in the description box for this this video.
Okay, so this is going to be a shock to a lot of deadheads. I'm very sorry. Please accept my apologies, but you probably should be sitting down and take a deep breath. I look around and there's only one guy at this little boarding school that plays the guitar, and he's the asshole Weir. I can't stand him, but he believes in table tilting, handling snakes, speaking in tongues, and oh, guess what? Channeling the dead, and maybe even under special circumstances, God Almighty himself, right? So I do the research. I make a deal with headmaster Lewis Perry, and the deal is, okay, don't kick Weir out for spring break like his mother wants him to, because that was the plan. Make him my roommate, and I'll train him for a career in music, because his mother wants to send him into the Army to make a man out of him. And he's not going to do well in the Army. He's, you know, just not that material. And so then I do my practice, and then I move into Weir's room and he's in athletics, and I put his guitar just on the edge of the bed so it's just about to fall off. And he comes in and he's outraged. What are you doing here? And he sees his delicate guitar, so he runs over and grabs it. And I roll my eyes up into my head and fall back into my bed like I'm swooning and get out my basic best basso profundo. And I said, you will be going back to the city of St. Francis to save the world from nuclear Armageddon. Look what's in your hand. My guitar, right? And so he gets direct communication from God Almighty to go home and save the world from nuclear Armageddon. You will be further directed by this channel. And then I pretend to wake up. What happened, Bob? And he's staring at me, eyes pretty big, but he buys it, right? And so then I've got him, right?
And a good-looking kid, right?
I don't know. Are you gay? I didn't know that. No, the school, real bordello. Anyway, after that, I trained Weir, and then around the middle of May, I've made up the name, the Grateful Dead. I've held lots of sessions because I played the year before. I played music in the dances, so I knew it. And there comes a point where I realized that Weir has accepted the mission of going back to San Francisco, finding this and this and this and this profile, which I got from my dad, you know, Dad, what, well, the profiles of the most successful bands in the last 100 years, Benny Goodman, John Philip Sousa. It ain't come back. Well, you have to have a Jew, you have to have a policeman's son or somebody that knows the local laws. You have to, right. And that Weir couldn't do it alone. I was loading too much on him because I was sort of putting a lot of information into him that he couldn't remember volitionally, but would be in his subconscious, because I was when you do that kind of thing, it's very direct. You will do this, and then you will do this. Yeah, right? I mean, it's like boot camp, right? But under stimulus, he'll remember. This is standard stuff. And so I looked around, and Barlow was the right guy to back him up. So I went to Barlow, and I said, look, Weir's going to be doing something very important. You know my background, right? So I didn't say it's White House stuff, but Barlow caught on. He wasn't dumb. And you can be famous, but you need to back him up because he's going to collapse within a couple of years. And he needs to be able to come to your ranch, ride horses, and he needs a bolt hole, right? And you can help him that way, and it'll make you famous. You'll get lots of drugs and girls, and you'll have a wonderful time, and so forth. But, you know, when the band needs me, you know, you guys are going to owe me $1 million. Oh, okay, Chip. Yeah, sure. Right. And then I went to Weir and I said, look, you know, when it becomes too much, and it will, because we're dealing with global thermonuclear war here and the Cold War between Russia and America, it's going to be very heavy load you're going to carry, but you can do it, especially if you retreat every now and then and go to Barlow and his ranch, because it was perfect. It's way out of nowhere. It might as well be Lhasa, Tibet, you know, and Barlow, being a cowboy, he spent a lot of time alone. So actually, in some ways, he'll be a good foil. He'll be a good, not quite a guru because he's too self-centered, but it will be a lonely place where you have time to get your thoughts together, right? And Weir said, okay. And then June 6th, we shook on it, and that's kind of pretty much the story. We made a deal that the band would owe me $1 million because I'd have a lot of other operations going. This was just part of the much bigger plan to create the Summer of Love, the acid test and all that, because the English are in on it. They have plenty of experience with drugs in China for 200 years, fought 2 wars for their ability to sell opium to the Chinese. And then it all blew up in their face. Thank you, England. That was really smart.
So, I mean, at the time that you were, you know, giving these thoughts to Bob Weir, were you aware of any of the English activities related to the third opium war or MK Ultra or
I grew up on that stuff. My dad used to visit England as a child a lot, right? And later, after Fountain Valley, I was in London at the court of St. James. So yeah, I know all about that. And at that time, the English Empire was still alive. Suez was over.
You know, I guess I'm in a way responsible for this because I was the one that brought Chip into our little research group here.